interest for money created out of thin air. One of the Rothschilds who helped orchestrate this scam said, "The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favours that there will be no opposition from that class. The great body of people mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantages will bear its burden without complaint." When perpetual and irredeemable debt was created and approved, so began the political enslavement of governments, nations, and more importantly, its people. You. So every note in existence is borrowed there, and you are essentially underwriting the national debt of your country, and it impoverishes you and your country, and all the funds ultimately end up in the bank's hands. This is what is called a debt-based economy. All those ridiculously high taxes you pay for your national debt, just keep them in business. It enriches just a few shareholders in the world. It is legal, theft, and fraud. Governments borrow from the central banks and then have to charge taxes in order to pay the interest, which are paid directly to the banks. And this fuels the creation of a vicious circle of perpetual and irredeemable debt. And therefore everything is owned by the banks. Amschel Bauer said, "Allow me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who writes the laws." Sir Josiah Stamp, Governor of the Bank of England, said, "It is the biggest sleight of hand trick ever witnessed." It's one thing to own the banks, but how do you control the people? Well, Temple Bar in the city is the juristic arm of the Crown, not the Queen however, and has an exclusive monopoly on legal fraud through their bar association franchises throughout the world. Within Temple Bar there are 4 Inns of Court. They are Lincoln's Inn, Gray's Inn, Middle Temple and Inner Temple. Entry into these very secret and carefully guarded societies is only to be found when one is called to the bar. All the bar attorneys in the world swear an oath and pledge their allegiance to the Crown or the city. Every bar association all over the world are franchises of the International Bar Association, and this is located at the Inns of Court of the Crown Temple. The reason they created the bar associations was that they needed to create and control law that benefited themselves and at the same time controlled the people. The law they invented was called Admiralty law or maritime law, and this in turn was translated into commercial law based in no small part on Talmudic law. In order to make the people of each country liable to taxation, countries had to be made into corporation of some sort so that the people could be contracted with under that system. Through trickery and shameless deceit and fraud, they soon conceived a means which they could con citizens into contracting under commercial law and thus become liable for taxation. It was done by so-called voluntary registration, which made it look mandatory, as if you had no choice. Even today, most of us do not see it because we have been so conditioned to believe in the law. Another fraud, pure criminal deceit. This is Rothschild's law. Because people have been so conditioned to believe in the system and the law, most people just cannot see it. It was seen before though for what it was. Shakespeare said, "The first thing to do is kill all the lawyers." When the Federal Reserve was instituted in 1913 in America, Woodrow Wilson, the president, realized what he had done, and after signing the Federal Reserve Act is quoted as saying, "I have unwittingly betrayed my country." In 1862, President Lincoln had printed and distributed $500 million worth of debt-free money, or Lincoln's greenbacks. He went on to say, we gave the people of this republic the greatest blessing they ever had, their own paper money to pay their own debts. He was assassinated shortly after making this statement. President Garfield in the early 1880s said, "Whoever controls the volume of money in our country is absolute master of all industry and commerce, and when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate." He was assassinated shortly thereafter as well. At the same time, the Times of London published a story, and here is a quote: "If that mischievous financial policy which had its origin in the North American Republic should become indurated down to a fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts and be without a debt. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its commerce. It will become prosperous beyond precedent in the history of civilized governments in the world. The brains and the wealth of all countries will go to North America. That government must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe." Now, the people that should have been assassinated would be the writers of this article. Governments do not want to print their own money because they don't want to be held responsible, and are now so dependent and so corrupted by this system they can see no way out. What qualifications do politicians need? None. Now, a profitable corporation is run by experts who know their business inside out. People with no qualifications at all are allowed to run the affairs of your nation. Many politicians have never even run their own businesses, let alone countries. But of course, when the only requirement is to obey the money masters, it's easy. Not only that, they can never be held accountable because in politics there are no contracts and no contractual obligations. Now do you see how you've been had, conned and swindled? So ultimately all the money in circulation ends up in the hands of those who control the scam. In fact, it is a very profitable business. You are enslaved to it. Why? Because you are forced to use their falsely printed debt money, and your government knows this. And the frightening thing is, they approve of it, because they are just as crooked too. Think about this. Your bank lends you credit, but they want paying back in money. But the bank never gave you any money. They gave you credit. All the bank does is exchange something of value for credit, your promissory note, and they never tell you this. So a quick summary behind how a bank loan really works. Well, money is created today by lending. So all money today is born as debt money. The person who wants a loan must provide to the bank something that he or she doesn't know is valuable, a promissory note. The promissory note is a bank asset, and that asset is deposited into a demand deposit type of account. The asset deposited is what provides the bank the value to be able to lend to you and to others. The bank exchanges like for like, just like the central bank and our government, then lies about it and calls it a loan. You and millions of others believe you have a debt, but not so. This is also the reason why in this system that you don't actually own your house. You don't ever get full title. You merely lease it because you can't pay a debt with a debt note.